G'day guys, today I'm going to be talking to Eliseo Labayen. He's running to be the next council member of the 29th Council District, which covers Forest Hills, Rego Park and Kew Gardens. The position is currently held by Karen Koslowitz, who is term limited. Eliseo, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Christian. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So tell us about yourself, why you're looking to run, and your background, Eliseo.
Sure, no problem. So again, for those who may not know who I am, my name is Eliseo Labayen, and I'm running for the New York City Council to represent District 29 next year. So I'm running because the decisions that we make in the next few years are going to seriously impact us for the next few decades. I'm talking about Borough Dale bulldozing over a few gardens. I'm talking about our small businesses being pushed to the brink, not necessarily from COVID, but from a lack of support from our state and our local leaders. I'm talking about an explosion in the homelessness population, food insecurity, and much more. I'm running to fight for our most vulnerable and lead the community with common sense reform, whether that's being able-bodied or disabled, elderly or young, our small business owners, our kids in our schools. I'm running to be that leader that will fight tooth and nail on every fight, all that I've mentioned and all the fights to come, to make sure that the community gets the attention it deserves. Now, in terms of my connection to the community, I like to think of it in three different ways: in being a native son, in being a volunteer, and in being a public servant. So in being a native son, I was born and raised in Forest Hills on 73rd Road and Queens Boulevard. I went to school at PS 101Q. I went to church at Our Lady Queen of Martyrs.
In terms of your civic, what you're doing in the civic area, what are you doing in Forest
Sure.
Rego Park area?
So right now, I'm actually really proud of what our campaign's been doing. We've been going door to door, speaking to as many small business owners and management as we can to get a specific feel of the suffering that they're going through, more of a listening tour, and organizing informal small business summits around the district. So whether you're a small business right along Queens Boulevard and Rego Park, or you're in the heart of Richmond Hill, I'm going around to get a deeper understanding specifically of the issues and to elevate and make some noise on this, because frankly, I feel like there's radio silence when it comes to what our local leaders are doing on this issue. Everyone's talking about reopening schools. That is important, but I'm talking about small businesses that have been with us for decades, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, that are weeks away from closing down. And the election's a year away, and I want to do what I can if I'm elected, but I don't have that long to wait. So I'm trying to get this organized as soon as possible to make some noise on the issue for small businesses.
Okay. One of the issues actually prior to the pandemic was the bicycle lanes or protected bicycle lanes on Queens Boulevard, Phase 4. You had some people that were very much pro it for safety purposes, and then you had some in the business community that sort of said, "Hey, listen, this could hurt our revenue." Well, what are your thoughts on that? And what would you do, moving forward if you were, to take the council position?
Definitely. So I like to avoid thinking about this as a zero-sum game. I don't believe that bike lanes have to take away from small businesses or vice versa. Now, for small businesses that would say these protected bike lanes are going to remove parking that are vital to the survival of our small business, I would say the larger enemy here isn't necessarily bike lanes. It's rising property taxes, rising rents, a lack of government support, and the rising competition from e-commerce. And for the bike lanes, again, this is basic safety measures for our residents living in the community. Whether you're young or old, a biker or not, everyone should be able to get behind public safety. So for the small businesses that are worried about being shut down, part of my small business platform is bringing back the Love Your Local grant program that was part of the Department of Small Business Services that was allowed to lapse. I want to bring it back and expand funding 100-fold. So instead of $3.6 million for 40 small businesses, we have $360 million for 4,000 small businesses. A much more robust response to say, hey, the city actually does care about small businesses. Here's what we're doing to actually make a difference on it. For the bike lane, same thing. stand behind it 100%, you can get both done.
Okay, so you're talking about doing phase four, but finding other ways in which businesses can increase their revenue and provide support, kind of, and that's what you
Yes.
mean by sort of a balanced approach. Okay. Another big issue, of course, in the last year or two has been the building of a jail in Kew Gardens. Big issue with the current council person. What are your thoughts on that? And what would you do? Would you be advocating for it going forward? I mean, there's probably going to be budget issues with building it, but where do you stand on it?
So I stand unequivocally opposed to the construction of this borough jail, and you could attack it for 100 different reasons, and I could spend an hour talking about it, but I'll try to condense it a few minutes for us. So I like to attack this on the process and the location. So when it comes to the process, normally of a structure this size, a borough jail, you have a land use application process, a ULURP process, and in this case we have 4 distinct sites being jam-packed into one with less public input, less of a review process, which I believe to railroad through City Hall so that this would be forced on people without a resistance being formally created. So our borough president, Melinda Katz, said no to this. The community board said no to this. Community associations, residents, everyone said no. But Councilmember Kosowitz said yes. So what did she say yes to? She said yes to a 19-story facility now that will house at least 886 people accused of violent felonies in the middle of a residential community within walking distance of 4 different schools. PS 99, the Q4 school, Ezra Academy, Archbishop Eloy High. For me, this is unacceptable. Either A.
Do you think the horse is out of the barn, or do you think it can be put back in with this project?
So when it comes to, no problem. The process, I think that the whole process, honestly, is disingenuous, saying that this project will go forward after we're all out of office. Let's pass the buck on to the next mayor and the next city council to stand behind this and fight for this. So I don't believe that it's too late to turn this process around. If you look at the distinct neighborhoods, whether it's Borum Hill or Mott Haven or Chinatown, people are up in arms over this, especially in Kew Gardens as well. So I think that new leadership in the city council, as well as new borough presidents and a new mayor, will definitely be able to say, hey, let's rethink this. COVID, the timing is bad. Our budget is in tatters. Let's see if we can think about this smartly and take our time with this.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you for that. Homelessness. Homelessness. It's a growing problem. We've heard about the hotel in Kew Gardens there, where there's been a lot of mischief going on. What do you think can be done to combat this, or to alleviate the problem?
No problem. So I think of tackling homelessness through the prism of mental health. So when it comes to people being unjustly put through the system because of mental illness or being hospitalized or going through whatever system we have, I think that the right way to go about this, which will also tackle what you mentioned before, is to expand on Kendra's law, which will allow certain individuals with serious mental illnesses to stay in treatment for up to a year, while also allowing the mental health system to provide that treatment, so that we can get people off of the streets and into treatments, that we're not only protecting the public and keeping people happy, but also providing treatments to our most vulnerable New Yorkers, people suffering, again, left to their own devices, going through suicide, substance abuse issues, violence towards others, property damage, you name it. So I think tackling this from a mental health prism is the best way to go about this.
Eliseo, tell me what your thoughts are on rezonings. There's going to be a lot of development happening in Forest Hills in years to come. And how will you look at, evaluating what makes sense, what doesn't, what the community needs? Give us your thoughts.
So when it comes to development, rezoning, I want to think, A, is there affordable housing involved? And B, will this help support the small business community in the area? So when you have a structure like, say, the abandoned Parkway Hospital right next to PS 196 and plans to redevelop that, I think, okay, well, they're trying to make it so that there's market rate, there's affordable housing and senior housing. And for me, that's great. we need affordable housing in the district. So if I see something and I see, okay, there's mandatory inclusionary housing involved, that's great. Is this going to be adding to the small business community, or is this just adding another CVS or another Target or another Starbucks? Looking for developing, as I touched on before, that sense of soul and community, that everyone knows each other, everyone has each other's backs, that this is a community where you feel like it's yours, not somewhere else.
Okay. One of the big issues right now facing the nation, it's even being discussed in the national election, is the police. The council, reduced the budget a little bit, for the NYPD. What are your thoughts on reducing budgets on the police department itself?
Sure. So when it comes to specifically defunding the NYPD budget, I say unequivocally, I agree with the cuts made by the city council. Now, if I could back up a sec, if you look at a country, a state, or a city's priorities, you look at where it spends its money in the budget. So you look at the DOE, they got $27.54 billion slotted for their executive budget in 2021. Pretty good. Almost a third of our budget for education. Beautiful. NYPD, after the cuts made, about $5.6 billion. But you look at the other budgets, FDNY, $2.1 billion. You look at the DOT, around 1.1. Department of Sanitation, $689 million. And the one that really drives me crazy, the Department of Small Business Services, less than $200 million. So if someone were to tell me every one of the $420 million that was specifically cut in the NYPD budget went to our struggling small businesses, our mom and pop shops that are literally dying on the vine, I would say yes, every single time. We need to balance out the multiple pillars that hold up our community. The police are a vibrant and very important part of that community, but so are small businesses, so are schools, so is mental health. We have to find a way to balance these priorities.
Okay. But would you change the number of officers on the street? Would you keep it the same? What would you do if you were if you're moving funds around to say small businesses? Sure.
So I'm happy with the headcount for the NYPD as it is now. I believe it's around 36,000 officers. And if you look at what's been going on locally around Metropolitan Avenue, there's been an uptick in burglaries for small businesses, which on top of COVID is insult to injury. And the people in this neighborhood, they know our police. They trust the police. We have strong connections with the police, with the 112th and the 102nd precinct. So when it comes to shifting the priorities around, I think that it was a wise move to limit overtime for this one instance for the budget. I do not believe that we should continue to cancel out new classes. I believe one is enough. And I'd like to think that the budgets made with the city council and NYPD was a wise budget, and I stand by that.
Okay. Big issue, of course, it's been discussed throughout New York City, community boards. How would you appoint new members? And what do you think of community boards, period?
I believe that they are the most local, the most directly reflective of the neighborhoods that they represent. They are comprised of our parents, teachers, professionals, lifelong residents. And when it comes to the three areas they work on, whether it's land use or the budget or services, they have an idea. It's like, yeah, I think I know what we could use better work on because I send my kids to school here and I've been living here for the last 25 years. So when it comes to the process, I think that our community boards right now are already comprised of what I was just talking about, reflective of the eclectic mix of expertise that community boards need to do a good job. Say, okay, they're the front line when it comes to zonings, when it comes to the budget. So I will continue to work with the borough president, Donovan Richards, and selecting who we believe to be the best assets for our community. By doing the same thing I've been doing with the small businesses, speaking to these people, learning about these people, and just getting that intimate feel for, okay, you want to do what's right for the community, you want to do right, I stand with you on that. Let's get this done.
All right. But in terms of okay, so you would work with the city, with the borough president to appoint the right people based on what
100%.
What you believe are the needs of the community. Okay. My final question, and thank you for your time today, is what would you do differently than the current council member, Karen Koslowitz? How would you, everyone has their style, everyone does things differently. How would you approach the job in your own way?
Definitely. And thank you for giving me the time to be here, Christian. Thank you for the questions. Really happy to be here. But when it comes to differing from council member Koslowitz, I would like to think of it in terms of being bounded by your imagination. I think that the role of a city council member, of a state assemblyman, a state senator, you name it, their capacity to make change is bounded by their imagination and their creativity. So when I look at issues affecting the state as well as the city, I say, hey, this might not be directly under my purview, but I can use the influence I have, the allies I have to try to make some movements on things that affect the city and the state. When it comes to the Councilmember Koslowitz, I have very strong disagreements with her when it comes to the specific policies of not finishing the Queens Boulevard bike lanes, when it comes to inviting in this Kew Gardens borough jail process, and when it comes to being silent on small businesses. I would be the council member that would be bold and loud when it comes to issues affecting not just this district, but across the city. I would always, as I said before, not be afraid to get my hands dirty and stand shoulder to shoulder with the community, because those are the people that I am held accountable to and that elected me, not the mayor, not the city council. So when it comes to being different, it's being strong, it's being bold, and it's not backing down when it comes to the citizens of my community versus City Hall. That's how I'd like to think of it as.
Thank you, Eliseo. I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you, Christian.